one of Santa's elves, drowned in global warming, darling.
The mystery of the spiral cult and its Alaskan roots are beginning to unravel like an orange peel, and the truth behind Annie's murder, the mine, and Salah will soon be revealed. Hey, welcome back to ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all the Easter eggs, references, and little things you might have missed in True Detective Night Country Episode 4. So, throughout this season, we have talked a lot about how ghosts are meant to symbolize the grief that is haunting our characters. Danvers is haunted by the loss of her son and her late husband, and Navarro is haunted by the mental illness and death of her mother, and fear that her sister is going to suffer the same fate. And both of these characters' griefs are tied to Annie. Danvers was left to raise her indigenous stepdaughter. She's become overbearing and dismissive of her daughter's heritage because she fears that she's going to suffer the same fate as Annie. We even see Danvers go and check on her daughter after having this nightmare and re-watching the video of Annie. And when she brushes her hair back to see her face, we get a reminder of how Danvers made her wipe off the markings on her chin, amplifying the fact that while Danvers feels guilty for making her wipe away her heritage, she's doing it because she thinks she's protecting her. Navarro also sees Annie in her own sister. We even see that both once had this blue hair dye, which could be a reference to the looming Blue King.
The blue what?
Well, as we've discussed in previous episodes, True Detective is tied to Lovecraftian horror, which took inspiration from old stories like The King in Yellow. And in Season 1 of True Detective, we even see and hear mention of this King in Yellow. Well, in this season, we've got the Blue King Crab Factory and this drawing of what looks like the King in Yellow in his crown actually drawn in blue marker. Here, as we see Jules walking in the snow, stripping out of her clothes, she is mirroring the actions of the scientists. It's been theorized that during the investigation that the scientists walked out into the snow and stripped down due to delirium.
People with severe hypothermia, they feel hot, they undress.
We also heard last week that the scientists may have done this out of sheer fright, which was also a callback to the opening scene of the season with the caribou. Here we see Jules being haunted by the voices in her head, and likely feeling the same state of fear that could cause someone to do something like stripping down in the snow. So perhaps this is foreshadowing that Jules' mental illness is connected to the poisoning of the water caused by the mine, and its connection to Salah and the scientists. When Danvers says,
"It's a miracle of overcoming shitty genetics,"
she's of course referring to her admiration for Peter, but her disdain for Hank, Peter's father. We've talked before about how Hank is totally connected to the Annie case and helped cover it up. But we've also theorized that he could have a deep connection to the spiral cult. We've heard Hank say,
"Blood is blood."
Now this line echoed how lineage seems to be greatly admired and respected by the spiral cult, with lines like this from the Season 1 villain Childress.
"My family's been here a long, long time."
So, with Danvers saying this line about Peter overcoming bad genetics, it could be meant to represent a breaking from the lineage that Peter comes from, a breaking from that never-ending spiral. Plus, the scientists are studying genetics in relation to immortality, which is another connection to the spiral cult's quest for immortality. So, this line could be meant to suggest how Peter is breaking not only from his father, but also from a possible connection to the cult. One thing I love about this show is that it's one giant puzzle that we're trying to figure out along with the protagonist. Like Danvers is this person who's so logical and analytical, teaching people how to ask the right questions. And that's how they'll eventually solve this mystery, by learning to be analytical and asking the right questions. But Danvers' biggest weakness is that she doesn't know math or science.
Yeah, if only there was some way she could use her analytical skills to learn math and science.
Well, there is. I spend about 15 minutes a day doing math and science lessons to sharpen my brain with Brilliant, the sponsor of this video. Brilliant helps you to learn something new every day, like science, computer science, or math. You'll learn to understand big things like terraforming Mars, or regular household items like how cell phones work. Heck, this lesson even made me a better pool player. Brilliant uses these short, interactive lessons because to learn anything, you've got to do it.
Do or do not.
Interactive learning is proven to be 6 times more effective than passive learning, like just watching videos. In fact, these lessons are more like games that are fun and short and built for busy people. See, I was a terrible math and science student in school. Maybe you were too. I felt like as an adult, I would never have the chance to learn those subjects, but Brilliant is great for understanding the world around us. You see, you're not just memorizing formulas or equations. Brilliant is building your intuition. So when you see a problem, you'll have the tools to solve it for yourself.
Well, yeah, but why would you want to learn math?
Well, for one thing, learning's fun, but also learning math is challenging. But if I can learn math, then I can learn anything, and learning is a lifelong skill. You see, with Brilliant, you learn how to think better. So to try everything Brilliant has to offer for free for a full 30 days and to get a 20% annual plan discount, visit brilliant.org/ScreenCrush or click the link in the description. Now back to True Detective. Now here we see Ted sniff this water before watering this dead plant, showing us that he knows how unsafe the water is, but continues to turn a blind eye. This could could also be meant to suggest that Ted is somehow connected to the greater scheme and cover-up, just like the Tuttle's cover-up of evidence in Season 1. Outside of this mental health facility, we see a lighthouse. Now, lighthouses are meant to symbolize safety and guidance, which is fitting for a place that's for those people who are struggling with mental health. Real lighthouses are a sign for sailors out in the darkness of the sea that land is near and to help guide them to safety. Now, this is fitting for this season of True Detective, with it taking place during the long night in Ennis, Alaska, which is surrounded by frozen seawater. The lighthouse will also come back into play when Jules leaves the facility. With the lighthouse being at the facility and Jules walking away from it, this is meant to symbolize Jules walking away from the light and into the darkness. The darkness which represents the great unknown of the sea, and as we later find out, Jules walks right into the ocean.
Walked onto the sea? Just walked.
Now, when Navarro leaves Jules at the facility, we get this long shot of the hallway. I think this is meant to be another parallel to Annie, who is under the ice within these hall-like tunnels, which we can actually see in the series opening credits. Jules walking down this hall and away from Navarro will eventually lead to her walking to her own death, paralleling how Annie's journey through the ice caves led to her eventual death. Next, we get this picture of Otis.
His name is Otis Heiss.
Now, as you can see, he has a white eye. This is in reference to not only the missing eye of the polar bears and the themes of turning a blind eye throughout the season, but it's also a reference to this character from Season 3, who also turned a blind eye to the abduction of children.
I was just trying to get up the nerve, trying to tell you what happened.
On this refrigerator, we can see a hexagon symbol.
No, not the beast!
Now, we discussed in our WandaVision coverage how hexagons could be a reference to Marvel's devil Mephisto, and this could be a satanic reference in this series as well, Satan being connected to the number 6, and our discussions of an evil lying beneath the ice which could represent hell. But in our research for this episode, we found out that in Christianity, the hexagon can actually represent God. The hexagon was the shape of King David's shield and was also viewed as a double holy trinity. So, with this hexagon looking over Danvers as she pursues the evils behind the spell, the hexagon could be meant to represent God watching out for Danvers. The opening quote of the series talked about the long night and how it was growing too late for even God to be awake, a quote from a character in The Yellow King. Now, we took this quote to mean that the darkness and evil to come would transpire without even God being present, but in the previous episodes, we discussed the third eye, the all-seeing eye, and the eye of God. The single eye we see with the polar bears, Danvers' son, the woman at the protest on the head of this drawing, and in Danvers' daughter's room could all be meant to represent the eye of God, keeping an eye on Danvers and guiding her throughout this case to bring down the spiral cult. Now, when I say God, I don't necessarily mean a literal overseer of the universe, but perhaps God is just meant to symbolize the light that is absent from Ennis, both literally and metaphorically, as well as the light that is absent in the heart of Danvers following the death of her son. And while Danvers is turning her back on the light, or on God, her embrace of the light will be key to defeating the darkness, aka the evil that has plagued Ennis.
Congratulations, you're a prophet.
Here, when Hank goes to meet his online girlfriend that stood him up, he's holding a stuffed rabbit. Now, rabbits are meant to symbolize fertility. In this scene, the rabbit's connection to fertility extends to Hank's lust for a connection with this woman. Back with Navarro and Danvers, we hear them once again discussing God and prayer.
Remember when you asked me earlier if I pray? She prays a lot.
Navarro says that her sister prays a lot, and the way she says it shows that she's concerned about her sister's mental health and connects back to this line from Rose in episode 2.
Don't confuse the spirit world with mental health issues.
And we get a reminder that Danvers has her back turned to God.
Still no God, though.
In this scene with Jules, we get the return of that damn orange.
It's an orange. Petrified.
Now, we saw this orange before in this scene when Navarro was walking out on the ice. Now, in that episode, we talked about how oranges also represent fertility, which could be meant as a connection to Annie and her delivery of many babies in the town of Ennis. So, when Navarro chucks this orange, it rolls back. Now, at the time, we discussed if this was actually happening. Did the orange actually roll back to Navarro, or was it all in her head? But then we took a page from Danvers, and we considered that we may be asking the wrong question.
Wrong question.
The question may not be, did the orange really roll back, but what did it represent? The case is the same for Jules. What is this orange meant to represent, and why are these two sisters seeing it? Well, going off the fertility connection, it could have a connection to their mother. We see their mother's cross necklace in this scene as well, and their mother suffered from severe mental illness. So, with Navarro and Jules both seeing the orange, and an orange having a connection to fertility, it could be telling us that Navarro and Jules' fear stems from childhood trauma. So Navarro goes to visit Rose, who, keep in mind, had a relationship with Rust Cole's father. Rose makes this quip about global warming.
One of Santa's elves. drowned in global warming, darling.
Now, global warming and climate change have been a key theme of this season, with pollution of the water being caused by the mine, as well as the Solal scientists' research of climate change. Now, we've theorized that this season's theme of a hell-like evil existing below the ice could be meant to symbolize the dangers of climate change and its effect on nature, or even meant to represent man's violation of Mother Nature. We also see this debate causing a rift between the people of Ennis, with those protesting the mine and those who defend the mine. This line about Santa's elves having drowned could be a reference to those protesting the mine for its poisoning of the water and the melting of the ice. In the writings of author J.R. Tolkien, elves were inspired by Tolkien's connection to Christian theology. They were meant to represent the people of Eden who had yet to fall to the temptation of sin. They were also meant to be wise, spiritual, and close to nature. So this line about elves could be connecting elves to the protesters, and them drowning is an allusion to them being killed, like Annie, for protesting climate change that could drown the planet. On the table here, we can see 5 candles. Now, in our research, we came across a poem by Sherry L. Williams. We light these 5 candles in honor of our loved ones. 1 for grief, 1 for courage, 1 for memories, 1 for our love, and 1 for our hope. Now, these are key themes in this season of True Detective. Danvers and Navarro are burdened by grief. The protesters of the mine demonstrate great courage. The ghosts that haunt Ennis represent their memories, and hope and love are present in all of our characters. Navarro loves her sister and hopes that she can get her through the darkness. Danvers loves her daughter and hopes that she can keep her safe. The protesters love their planet and hope for a better tomorrow. And it's that love and hope that I believe will push Navarro and Danvers to solve Annie's murder and bring down the Spiral cult. Next, we get this line from Rose.
Except for all fucking dead.
Now, I love this line so much, and it of course plays into the overall theme of haunting from grief, as well as the Lovecraftian nature of the series, which keeps the viewer asking themselves if something truly supernatural is afoot. When Jules escapes the facility and walks out into the ice, we see her strip down and set her clothes aside, just like the scientist. Once again, bringing into question if Jules and the scientist were victims of the same invasion of the mind or delirium. Here, Navarro gets SpongeBob toothpaste as a present from Eddie, a callback to the SpongeBob toothbrush that she gave him.
And SpongeBob represents evil.
What?
The evil and the answers to the Spiral cult are beneath the ice, right?
Yeah.
And the ice was once water, right?
Yes.
And SpongeBob lives underwater, and he is yellow, like the Yellow King.
Shit! Okay, so when Danvers discovers that in the videos of Clark and Annie, the power is cut, we learn 2 things. 1, that there is something powering a light source in the caves. It wasn't just the light from Annie's phone. And that the power is likely connected to Solal. This furthers the idea that the mine, Solal, and the murder of Annie are all connected. And in that video of Annie, we heard the scream before the power went out. So what if Clark is hearing another victim scream before the power goes out in this video? The Spiral cult could be using the mine to move women and children as part of the cult's trafficking system. So maybe there's another victim that we haven't even heard about yet who is being moved through the caves. And when she screamed, the power was cut, just like with Annie. And when Clark heard it, his guilt led him to believe that it must be the ghost of Annie having returned. Now here on this truck, we can see antlers. Antlers, of course, being a sign of the Yellow King from season 1. And when Navarro and Peter arrive to question Oliver, Peter says,
"This feels a lot like..."
He's referring to this feeling just like the crime scene at Solal with the scientist. It feels like Oliver left in a hurry, and we can even see that he left his boots and coat behind.
How scared do you have to be to run out in the ice without any shoes?
As well as this drawing and the stone with the spiral. And when Peter and Navarro bring the stone outside, we see this dog start barking at it.
You have any idea what this is?
Now this is a great touch because in lots of paranormal movies, we've seen scenes where the dog is barking at the dark empty hallway or growling at a seemingly vacant doorway, implying that the dog can see something that we can't. The dog barking at the spiral symbol gives the impression not only that it's dangerous, but that it has a paranormal connection. When Danvers drives drunk to see Ted, this is hypocritical behavior on her part. In the first episode, we see her arrest this woman for driving drunk. She shows great animosity toward her, so with Danvers now driving drunk, it shows that she could be showing great animosity toward herself for her inability to connect with her daughter and solve Annie's case. On Ted's TV, we see the scene from Elf when Buddy is walking out into the great unknown of the North Pole. Now, in that movie, Buddy is walking into the great unknown to go find his father.
Bye, buddy. Hope you find your dad.
Paralleling Jules walking into the great unknown to find peace and perhaps her mother. And then we get this scene from Elf playing at Hank's house.
I ought to say no, no, no.
Mind if I move in?
At least I'm...
This is one of the best scenes from that movie. Will Ferrell and Zooey Deschanel harmonize so well together. But this song also has a lot of ties to what's going on in this series. Now, a few years back, this song was subject to some controversy because it depicts a woman saying she wants to leave and the man isn't taking no for an answer. This could parallel the assault culture we've seen the Spiral cult take part in. But this could also be paralleling Jules' walk into the great unknown. Navarro begged her to stay, but Jules felt like she just had to go. When Navarro goes to see Danvers, she sees the stuffed one-eyed polar bear that belonged to Danvers' son. Navarro has a flashback to her vision in the ice of Holden and the one-eyed stuffed bear. Navarro asks,
Is this his?
Now this is more cosmic horror, a suggestion of the supernatural. If Navarro had never seen this bear before, but she's having visions of Holden with it, then that would imply that there's something supernatural going on, an idea that Danvers rejects.
I don't know what weird-ass shit you're thinking, but just stop it. Dead people are dead.
Now, we could talk about how it's possible that Navarro saw Holden with the bear once and then forgot, but the memory is still in her subconscious. But I think that we'd be asking the wrong question.
Start asking questions.
The question isn't if something paranormal is going on, the question is, why did Navarro see the stuffed bear and Holden in her visions? What are the writers trying to tell us here? I think that Danvers and Navarro are meant to be each other's saving grace, and to help pull one another from their own grief-ridden darkness. Navarro questions Danvers about the bear, causing a discussion to be had about the afterlife and Danvers' grief of her dead son, and how it connects to Annie and her stepdaughter. This conversation then sparks a discussion on the difference between the supernatural and suffering from mental illness, echoing this line from Rose in episode 2.
Don't confuse the spirit world with mental health issues.
We hear Navarro say that Jules was diagnosed with schizophrenia, bipolar, and borderline personality disorder. And Navarro now feels this same sickness is coming for her like it did for her mother and sister. But the way she talks about it gives it a supernatural bend.
Something calls us and we follow. Stop it. And it's calling me now.
And then we get to see what Danvers really believes when she insists that Navarro saw something that day in the Wheeler house. This spirit that Navarro saw was pointing, just like Lund was in the previous episode. So Navarro, going in, had a belief of the supernatural, but begins to question her own sanity. And Danvers, going in, had a very nihilistic view that made her feel alone. But she then flips and shows her true feelings when she's comforting Navarro. So again, I don't think the question is it real? The question is, what does it mean? And in this instance, it was to bring Navarro and Danvers closer together. Navarro and Danvers go out to find Clark after a picture of him was seen wearing Annie's coat out on the ice. In this building, we see writing that reads, "Stay off the grass." Now this could be a reference to Childress from season 1. When we first met his character, he was mowing the grass, and the expression "keep off the grass" could be meant to symbolize a warning to stay away. In season 1, Childress was very protective of his temple of Carcosa, Carcosa being what the spiral symbol represents.
This is Carcosa.
On this wall, we can see this big tentacle monster, which is another reference to
Cthulhu.
Yes, in our breakdown of the first episode, we talked a lot about Cthulhu, a Lovecraftian monster who lives at the bottom of the ocean and who possesses the power to make humans go mad. Cthulhu is similar to the character of Hastur, who also has tentacles and is connected to the Yellow King. Now, the first season also had these themes about whether or not God is real or whether we should just believe in a big spaghetti monster. And if you'll remember, the little girl who escaped Childress described that she was attacked by a spaghetti monster, but what she was actually describing was the scars on Childress's jaw. So when we talk about monsters with tentacles, Childress and all these child predators fit into that category. So while Clark is nowhere to be found, Danvers does find Otis, who is wearing Annie's jacket. When Danvers questions him about Clark, Otis says,
"He's gone. He went back down to hide."
Now this could mean that beneath this building are the very tunnels where Annie went missing, and that Clark is using to stay away from the police. We also got this fun name drop for the series.
"He's hiding in the night country."
He said it! He said it!
And while Danvers is pursuing Otis, we see Navarro being haunted by the grief of her dead sister. And when Danvers finds Navarro, she is bleeding from her ear. Now, this could be a connection to the scientists and their busted eardrums, or it could be meant to symbolize that Navarro is hearing evil things. But I think in reality, she's probably bleeding from her fight earlier in the episode.
So she really didn't see the ghost lady?
Well, again, buddy, that may be the wrong question. In Navarro's own mind, she probably did see the ghost, but whether it was really there is irrelevant. The question is, what is her own subconscious trying to tell her? And I think that we're going to have the answer to that very soon. So, guys, those are all the Easter eggs and references that we caught. Big shout out to the writer of this video, Mr. Colton Ogburn. You can find his socials and mine below. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For ScreenCrush, I'm Ryan Airy.